The U.S. Navy was built to dominate the seas. But right now, it can't even secure a waterway controlled by a rebel group from Yemen. How did a poor mountain militia become one of the most unstoppable forces in the Middle East? And is there any way to contain them? The Houthis began as a Zaydi Shia revivalist movement in Yemen's northern mountains, centered in Saada. At first, it wasn't about missiles or global shipping lanes, it was a local rebellion. A small community resisting what they saw as government corruption, economic neglect, and Saudi-backed Wahhabi influence creeping into their homeland. What started as an isolated uprising has now transformed into one of the most resilient and dangerous insurgent movements in the Middle East. By 2014, the Houthis were no longer just mountain rebels in Saada. Under the leadership of Abdul Malik al-Houthi, they swept south and shocked the world by capturing Sanaa, Yemen's capital. The internationally recognized government of President Abdrabbuh Mansur Hadi crumbled almost overnight. Ministries were seized, army bases overrun, and checkpoints set up across the city. Their stated goal was to end corruption, fight what they called Saudi and American influence, and restore Yemen to what they saw as its true independent path. They forced President Hadi to sign the so-called Peace and National Partnership Agreement, a deal that looked like compromise, but in reality legitimized their takeover. They dissolved parliament and sidelined Hadi's officials, creating their own governing body, first called the Revolutionary Committee, later replaced by the Supreme Political Council. To consolidate power, new checkpoints, intelligence networks, and local committees spread across Sanaa, giving the Houthis near-total control of daily life. They took over key revenue streams, customs, taxation, and even fuel imports. That money funded their war machine and social programs that kept their base loyal. Schools and media were reshaped with Houthi slogans like "Death to America," "Death to Israel," "Curse the Jews," "Victory to Islam." What began as a local rebellion was now molding a state in its own image. At the heart of the Houthis' resilience is a mindset built on martyrdom. Death is seen as the greatest reward in the battlefield. This is the reason why, when U.S. warships and jets pounded Houthi launch sites in 2024, the rebels didn't scatter. They filmed the craters, paraded the bodies, and turned every missile strike into a victory chant. To their followers, each American attack wasn't a defeat. It was proof that a mountain militia had forced the world's superpower to fight them head-on. And nowhere is that fight harder than Yemen's highlands, a natural fortress. When U.S. jets and Israeli drones struck Saada and Hajjah earlier this year, the Houthis didn't line up in the open. They vanished into tunnels carved into the cliffs, wheeled missile launchers out from caves, and fired before satellites could even adjust. Hours after the raids, Houthi drones were still swarming over Eilat, and a missile slammed into the Red Sea shipping lanes. American warships in the Gulf of Aden reported hunting for mobile launchers, only to find empty valleys and fake decoys. Israeli strikes hit warehouses in Sanaa, but by the next week, new footage showed the Houthis parading long-range drones through the same streets. The mountains make this possible. Fighters haul weapons on mule tracks invisible to satellites, stash fuel in terraced villages, and scatter convoys so a single strike can't wipe them out. In January, when the U.S. flattened suspected missile sites near Marib, the Houthis simply shifted their batteries west into Hajjah, and within days, another barrage targeted Israeli shipping. Every valley hides a supply chain. Every cave doubles as a command post. To the Houthis, Yemen's geography isn't a battlefield. It's their shield, their trap, and their greatest weapon. But it's not just the mountains. It's the way the Houthis fight inside them. They don't have a pentagon. They don't have a single base you can flatten and claim victory. Instead, power is scattered across dozens of commanders, each controlling their own networks of fighters, workshops, and launch crews. Take one out, two others pop up in different provinces. Their missile and drone launchers are constantly on the move. One day, hidden under palm groves near Hudaydah, the next day, trucked up a dirt road in Hajjah, disguised under tarps and farm equipment. American surveillance drones circle overhead, but by the time a strike is cleared, the convoy is already gone. Even when Israel or the US does hit a target, it's often a decoy wooden mock-ups of missile batteries, fake radar dishes, or empty warehouses. Real launchers reappear days later, firing salvos at ships in the Red Sea or drones toward Eilat. This decentralization is deliberate. It means the Houthis can take heavy losses without ever collapsing. There's no single door to kick down, no central bunker where the war ends. Their adaptability turns every strike into a temporary setback, not a defeat. What keeps the Houthis supplied, upgraded, and dangerous is the web of external help behind them. Tehran has been the Houthis' single most important outside patron, providing missile and drone designs, guidance systems, and technical training that turned crude rockets into longer-range, more accurate weapons. Iranian blueprints and components have helped the group move from short-range rockets to the medium-range missiles and armed drones that can now strike as far as Israel and the UAE and threaten ships in the Red Sea. US and international investigators have repeatedly traced advanced components and guidance packages back to Iranian networks. Those Iranian parts don't always arrive on a parade. Instead, they flow through a messy supply chain of smugglers, commercial shipments, and dual-use civilian tech. Investigations show components arriving disguised as agricultural machinery, crane parts, or satellite equipment, items that can be used for both port reconstruction and for building drone launchers or command stations. Recent analyses also highlight how outside actors, state and private, have supplied satellite imagery, prefabricated port gear, and components that are hard to classify but very useful for Houthi logistics. Under pressure from naval seizures and tighter sanctions, the Houthis have dramatically scaled up their local production. Workshops in Houthi-controlled provinces reverse engineer imported parts, assemble drones from local and smuggled pieces, and produce rocket airframes in improvised factories. Independent military analysts note that while Iran remains critical for higher-end tech, engines, advanced guidance, the Houthis have become far less dependent than a few years ago, enough to sustain frequent drone and missile launches even when resupply is disrupted. So you see that the external support turns a mountain militia into a strategic actor. Iranian designs and training give technical punch. Smuggled dual-use gear and outside satellite imagery expand reach and accuracy. And growing local manufacture reduces fragility. The result is a group that can absorb strikes, rearm quickly, and keep hitting high-value targets from commercial shipping lanes to Israeli cities without a predictable supply line for opponents to choke off. But how do the Houthis survive far stronger enemy? For years, Saudi Arabia relied on a blunt, military-first approach. Bomb the Houthis, push them back into the mountains, and restore the Hadi government in Sanaa. They poured money into air campaigns and backed allied ground forces, but after years of high costs and little to show for it, Riyadh began to change course. Today, Saudi strategy is less about crushing the Houthis outright, and more about managing them, cutting deals with northern tribes, funding local militias, and even testing quiet negotiations to stabilize its border. It's a recognition that heavy airstrikes alone can't uproot a decentralized mountain insurgency. The UAE, meanwhile, never played by quite the same rules. Abu Dhabi's priority wasn't the mountains of the north, it was the ports of the south. By backing local militias, investing in Aden, and securing footholds in places like Hudaydah through Proxies, the Emiratis built their influence along Yemen's coastline. Even after a partial drawdown, their economic projects and political ties in the south remain strong. But that southern-first strategy has kept the anti-Houthi camp divided. While Riyadh focuses on border security, Abu Dhabi leans on port control and local autonomy. Caught in the middle is the internationally recognized Yemeni government, headquartered in Aden. Plagued by corruption, infighting, and weak territorial control, it has struggled to lead a coherent national campaign. At times, it has even been accused of cutting opportunistic deals with local Houthi commanders, a sign of just how fractured the Yemeni political landscape has become. With no monopoly on legitimacy or force, this government can't act as the unifying core of an anti-Houthi coalition. And then there are Israel and the United States, the outside powers with unmatched precision and reach. Between 2023 and 2025, they launched strikes, escorted convoys, and spearheaded Operation Prosperity Guardian to secure Red Sea shipping lanes. But their aims aren't the same as Riyadh's or Abu Dhabi's. Washington wants to keep global trade flowing and deter attacks on its ships. Israel wants to stop missiles from reaching its cities. That means their strikes tend to be sharp but limited, effective at crisis management, but never enough to reshape the war inside Yemen. Even when the U.S. escalated to direct strikes in 2024 to 2025, or helped broker a temporary ceasefire, the policy kept swinging between pressure and de-escalation. Without a long-term political endgame, those efforts remained tactical fixes rather than a strategy. By 2025, the Houthis aren't just Yemen's problem anymore. They've stretched their reach across the region. Their drones and missiles now hit targets in Israel and the UAE, proof that a mountain militia can strike hundreds of miles beyond its borders. At sea, they've turned the Red Sea into a pressure point for the entire world economy. When the Eternity Sea went down and its crew was captured, it sent a chill through global shipping lanes. For a brief moment, it looked like the tide might calm. After Israel's ceasefire with Hamas, Houthi attacks slowed, giving merchants a chance to breathe. Shipping traffic through the Red Sea climbed back by more than half, but it didn't last. The missiles and drones soon returned, reminding everyone that the lanes remain hostage to Houthi power. And while the missiles fly, the politics shift. Saudi Arabia, exhausted by years of costly war, has begun quietly talking to the very movement it once vowed to crush, with Oman stepping in as mediator. At the same time, the Houthis have tightened their grip on humanitarian aid. By deciding who eats and who starves, they turn famine into leverage, cementing their authority inside Yemen. In short, 2025 marks the moment the Houthis transformed from local insurgents into a regional disruptor, one with missiles, shipping chokeholds, and even diplomatic channels at their disposal. So what can actually be done? None of the options are good, but the cost of doing nothing may be even worse. Airstrikes are the most obvious tool, and the one tried the longest, but they're expensive, politically costly, and rarely decisive. A decade of bombing campaigns by Saudi Arabia, and now direct US and Israeli strikes, have not broken the Houthis. Instead, every destroyed neighborhood becomes propaganda. Every funeral, another recruitment rally. Hitting launch sites or depots may slow their operations, but it doesn't erase a movement that survives by dispersing into mountains, tunnels, and villages. Then there's blockade and containment. On paper, starving the Houthis of supplies might weaken them. In practice, it only starves Yemen itself. A naval chokehold deepens the humanitarian crisis. leaves millions dependent on Houthi-controlled aid distribution, and hands the group the perfect narrative, that they are David standing against a Western Goliath. The Red Sea embargoes have slowed shipping but also spiked global costs and reinforced the Houthis' image as a force powerful enough to shake world trade. That leaves diplomacy. It's messy, fragile, and often unsatisfying, but it's the only realistic path. Saudi-Iran talks already show that regional rivals can shift from confrontation to managed coexistence. Oman's mediation channels offer a rare neutral bridge. Engagement doesn't mean endorsement. It means acknowledging reality. The Houthis are not a temporary militia that will disappear with one more strike. They've survived wars with Saudi Arabia, outlasted rival Yemeni governments, and now forced the United States and Israel to fight them directly. The truth is unavoidable. Any political settlement for Yemen's future has to include the Houthis as a permanent actor. Ignoring them hasn't worked. Crushing them has failed. Containing them risks global shipping chaos. That leaves one uncomfortable but necessary conclusion. The Houthis aren't going anywhere. The question isn't how to erase them, but how to deal with them without letting the region slide into endless escalation.